Okay, if you've heard one thing about Mass Effect 3, and you know anything about me, or about some of the movements I was a part of when the game launched, you're probably expecting this review to be a long rant. It's not going to be. First of all, my N7-Day videos are supposed to be a celebration that gets people excited. That is for us fans to reminisce and start discussion points, maybe, if anybody sees this and thinks I make any points worth talking about. Second of all, I've moved on. There are things to move on, but there are just three points about the ending of this game I'm going to make at the beginning of the review, and then I am not going to talk about it anymore. Remember, personal opinions are always subjective. However, enough people agreed that I believe that we could come to a conclusion that for the long-term fans, it wasn't satisfying. Okay. But first things first, if you've played this game, if you got this game after late 2012, then you most likely, and you don't get what people were upset about, you most likely haven't seen or played the ending that actually got all the flack going. The fact is that because of the immense pressure from the fans, BioWare put other DLC on hold because they saw that it affected the game sales. To put it in perspective, this game I saw it within a couple of months end up, not the collector's edition, but I saw the basic edition drop from $60. I got the $90 collector's edition, but I saw it drop down from around $60 within a couple of months to $20. So that gives you some idea of. Meanwhile, stores were still selling. Meanwhile, I saw on the same racks in the same stores them selling the used Xbox. They were selling the new copies for the consoles of Mass Effect 3 for $20, and they were selling the used copies of these games for around $20 to $30 for the consoles. And they were still holding that price on the PC too. So yeah, and at the time, the first game was 5 years old, so that wasn't seen as a good thing. Plus, we made our voice heard. So we made our voice heard, and we got the worst parts of the ending patched. So, and most of the time the game automatically just downloads it as a patch as part of its install, because this is the first game. This is one of the first games EA ever put out that used the Origin client. And believe me, at the time, that client was bugged up. It gave us so much trouble launching. But anyway, so chances are, if you're new, you will never see what actually got people upset. So that a lot of technical details that just caused people to want to tear their hair out because it was coming from a franchise that did such a good job with all the little technical details. and keeping things in character. Second of all, BioWare and EA did the worst thing they could have done with this debacle when people first started asking about it. And the first questions that asked about it was, okay, so is there going to be DLC coming out that will expand on this and explain the long-term consequences of what happens in the ending? Because here's the thing, even patch the ending, it doesn't feel like it matters since you don't see any long-term consequences. You don't play through them. Before a Mass Effect, if you made a massive choice like you did in the ending, this series had trained us to play through the world and see how the world was after our long-term choices. After our big choices, and see what fallout they had in both the immediate and the long term. This, we didn't get that. But BioWare's response was to have a bunch of people running around like headless chickens on the message board, some of which say, yes, 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 keep your saves, because something is coming that'll make this all worthwhile, when that wasn't the case at all. That was never the plan. And then they had others who just plain insulted people, called them names, and said that they were too stupid to understand how brilliant it was. This is previously the company that was... This was the nicest company on the face of the earth. And before, they had always... Here's the thing, before, I think what got a lot of the fans back up, and there was no excuse for the fans that threatened people that were trying to launch lawsuits. I am not defending them. Not at all. But before this, BioWare had always been the company that had taken criticism on board. And they had taken it in the spirit that it was offered. And the fans, by and large, were never nasty. I was there for a lot of their history on the message boards and later on the Facebook pages and such. And most of it was offered in the spirit of, oh yeah, this is great, but if you would just make an adjustment here or there, it would vastly improve it. And BioWare had always taken that on board in the past. They had credited Mass Effect 2 with playing so much better than Mass Effect 1 with that kind of feedback. And they took some feedback from Mass Effect 2 on board with Mass Effect 3 and restored some of the RPG elements, but made them balanced so they didn't overwhelm you and you don't have to spend massive amounts of time in your inventory like you did in Mass Effect 1. So inventory and RPG mechanics wise, this actually has the best balance. And again, they said that was all due to fan feedback. So then when we saw this one problem at the end, a lot of us just went on there and said, okay, and it was like, okay, here's what screwed up, here's what messed up there, and here's how we think you can fix it, and we look forward to seeing. But if you're not going to, then but it ended with an ad saying get more DLCs, so we know DLC's coming, so we look forward to seeing how you explore this, but just try to avoid these pitfalls. That's how it started out. But then when they started calling people stupid and started standing up and saying, what, are you trying to take away our right to be artists? Which nobody was trying to do. We were just saying this is a commercial product, and look, it's being hurt by this, and we don't want the Mass Effect series hurt. Then it got people, and there were faults on both sides, and it got nasty. So that's the other thing, is that BioWare's response. BioWare, when they finally got PR people actually handling it, we could tell because the responses became much more measured. It took about almost 2 months after the game's launch, but I remember when all of a sudden on the official message boards, all of a sudden the responses became much more tempered, and all of a sudden these new people from BioWare, not the old people who had been coming in there and calling us, started making these obvious, and yeah, but they were much more conciliatory PR responses, and we were like, and everybody knew what had happened. A bunch of programmers who had been working insane hours, because EA set an impossible deadline. That that's a point that often gets overlooked. The first Mass Effect spent depending on what source you listen to, spent between 4 and 5 years in various stages of development. Second Mass Effect 2 spent around 3 years in development, and what's more, they stopped developing DLC for Mass Effect 1 so that they could focus on making Mass Effect 2 the best game possible. Mass Effect 3 came out just 2 years after Mass Effect 1, and all that DLC I listed at the end of my Mass Effect 2 review was being developed along with it. So, obviously, the team was put in a crunch. But here's the worst thing that happened. The ending didn't make sense with all the clues that had been set up. They started setting up clues for how the game was going to end. They did know what the story was about. They said that the writers have always, and some of the programmers have always maintained that they had a vague idea in Mass Effect 1 what the story was going to be about if they got the trilogy that they planned, which they did, which I think they deserve an award. If there was an Academy of interactive video arts and sciences, they deserve an award for the first time completing a trilogy like this, where choices get imported and all that other stuff. But anyway, here's what happened. About 4 or 5 months before the release, the script for the ending of Mass Effect 3, which originally matched all the clues they had started setting up and heavily foreshadowing in Mass Effect 2, and had very little in common with Mass Effect, with what we got in Mass Effect 3, and was designed to take all your choices in all free games into account as to what ending you got. Was leaked online. Some jerk leaked it online, and I don't know. It feels more like an EA move, so I'm going to put it on EA. Because they know how to wreck everything. They hit the panic button. Now, most fans refuse to look at this, and it was taken down off the internet. And I'm sure you can find it somewhere, because once something has been up on the internet, it can be. But most of us refuse to even go to the trouble of looking at it, even when somebody sent a link to it. I refuse to look at it. I don't know anybody I talked to online who looked at it at the time, because none of us wanted this experience spoiled. Even if we knew with the script, we still wanted to experience it ourselves fresh and go through it. I mean, the hype for this game was amazing going into the last few months. I mean, you had Commander Shepard appearing on advertising for razors. You had all the products tie-in. You had Walmart putting up big banners for the launch date of Mass Effect 3. This was poised to be the next Halo 2 and 2 or 3 in size of its launch. And I built a brand new PC around the system specs to make sure I wouldn't have any trouble running it. And then I pre-ordered from Amazon the $90 collector's edition with all the extras and the DLC on it. And I paid for it to ship that very day. So we were hyped, and we didn't care that the ending had been leaked. But I'm pretty sure it's Electronic Arts hit the panic button. They said the whole ending had to be scrapped and replaced with something. and it had to be simple. It had to boil it down to very simple so that they could easily do the new cutscenes and easily put everything together, because by now the game was in a crunch time. And the game was, and they were in crunch time, and I think most of the writers had been had gone to work on other projects, because that's how things tend to go when working on video games. Heck, that's how things tend to go in Hollywood movies. So you had all that and going on. So one of the producers had to go in behind who had never written any part of the Mass Effect story. He had come up with the mechanics and the basic idea of making their own space RPG, and a lot of the basic mechanics and the way the Paragon Renegade system would work, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. However, this producer had never actually written the story, and he didn't actually understand and I don't think he understood the underlying intellectual themes that have been built up. Tim, he's a programmer and a producer who's worried about game engines working. That's what a game producer is mostly worried about. He's not worried about whether it works philosophically, or whether it lines up with all the clues that have been set up previously, or whether or not what he wrote is in character for certain characters. Those are all details people below him handle. He handles getting the game working on time and making sure everyone is doing their jobs smooth, and everyone is doing their jobs. And if everyone's doing their jobs and he's running it right, which he had on the two previous games, and for a good portion of this game, then those problems sort themselves out with their various people in their various departments, and it comes together. And hopefully you only need some minor stepping in to do some tweaks later on. Having him go in and just rewrite it and just present it to everyone, and then just have them have to live with it, was a horrible idea, and I can only assume it came from EA because that was the cheapest and quickest way to do it. They did not want to push this release date. There was so much hype, they didn't want to push this release date. They didn't want to give it. They saw what a massive money-making machine they had on their hands, and they were nearly done, and the multiplayer had been nearly completed, which the multiplayer is, of course, big dollars. That's where the big dollars are. Online multiplayer, it had been around and had taken off for a while, but this was EA's first attempt to they were having big success with the Battlefield franchise at this time, and and this was their attempt to get it into the space age and take a chunk of that Halo pie. So they wanted this online for the online multiplayer component. And the fact that to get the best portion of this ending, you were originally, now it's been patched, but you were originally required to play so much multiplayer. You would have to play around 2.5 hours of multiplayer every single day, along with the single player, in order to keep a score from going down, so that you could have all the points you needed, because the score goes down every day you don't play. So you earn points that go into your game that tell you what that affected which of the three or four, or if you count that way, 4 slightly different endings you get, and the best possible outcome, which didn't have much in the way of hope in it, from a game series that previously had defined hope in hopeless situations, was dependent on you playing tons of multiplayer, which I couldn't get because I was stuck on dial-up. So and I wasn't the only one. I have to remember, the infrastructure for dial-up, especially in this past couple of years, has really improved. Like, this past July was when we finally got a high-speed line out where I live. But there's still around 5 to 10% of the country, and I used to be part of that, where high-speed internet in the United States is inaccessible. You are stuck on a dial-up connection, or using or using one of those slow Wi-Fi things that cost an absolute fortune that there's no way you can game on. So that really ground our gears a lot. And so you have all that coming together, and it was just this perfect storm for the ending to eclipse everything else. And so if you need to understand why Mass Effect 3's ending got so much attention for so long, that's it. Now, what you should know is that between the patch and a fan-made ending that you can get, this has been totally taken away. The sting of this has been totally taken away. Since no more Mass Effect games are ever going to take place after 3, BioWare and EA have confirmed this, then there's no reason why the fan-made ending that can be installed just like any piece of DLC on Mass Effect 2, and which BioWare, to their credit, has been good enough to leave an active link on the front page of a thread on their message board since it came out in late 2013. The first version of it came out in late 2013. That link has been updated, and you can just go to the BioWare message board and you can get the link from there and download for free this modded ending, which, while it's not perfect because it still locks you into just one option for the ending, it at least gives you the sense of hope if you're playing this as a grand heroic tale. So I went on longer than I thought I would, but I just wanted to... But I run into these questions every time I talk about Mass Effect to somebody online. I run into this and I have to have this whole long conversation. Sometimes it takes days typing it out. So I just wanted to state it out here on video. And in the future, I think I'll just link to this video where I explain what happened then and why it's not an issue, and why it's not an issue for me now. Of course, the mod only works on PCs. And I will talk about a couple of mods later on in the section where after I talk about the DLC for this game. So you'll be hearing about the mod. So all you need to know is that if I talk about a mod here, you can get it. You can get it on Nexus Mods for free, and the only ones that I will personally recommend will be ones that add significant value to the game in my book, are well done, and can be installed as easily as the DLC to Mass Effect 2. So, yeah, with that massive disclaimer out of the way, now let's go on and talk about what is done. What is done with this game. So the hype for this game was through the roof. I think I've established that. I've never been more hyped for a game. Every new trailer set me on edge. I was just like, I literally was marking the days on my calendar, and like, I don't know, I haven't felt this way since I don't think I have felt this way since my mom and dad had pretty much given away that they were getting my brother and I a PlayStation that had Crash Bandicoot 2 as its packing game. PlayStation pack from Sam's Club as our Christmas present back when I was a kid. I don't think I've ever... They didn't exactly... It's one of those situations where they didn't exactly tell us, but they did ask us if we were to get a video game system, would we rather have the N64 or the PlayStation? What was a game called Bandicoot about? And, yeah, it was one of those things where, and we said PlayStation, I think mainly because the neighbor across the street had had an N64, and we spent hours over there playing like Mario Kart, playing. I think Mario Kart was out at the time, GoldenEye, and Super Mario World, and Star Fox 64. So at the time, it seemed at the time, and our previous system, the system that we had at the moment at the time was an NES. So this was like a huge jump up for us. Yeah, it was one of those things where, you know, you know how parents are. Yeah, yeah. They're like, but yeah, one of those things. It was like they never came out and said it, but my brother and I, we knew, and we were just counting the days until Christmas when we would finally see that thing under the tree and be able to unwrap it. But anyway, so many parts of this do live up to the hype. That's what I'm going to say. First of all, it brings some of the atmosphere of being in the middle of a war with people dying and people being desperate so well. You're immediately under fire. You're immediately pulling back you're immediately making a strategic retreat to prepare your forces and to get this long shot going. You're running into you're running into other characters, but they're busy with the war. I was kind of disappointed that more characters from the previous games didn't return, and in some cases it does feel lazy, particularly with Miranda. There's one subplot she has to complete, and yeah, that keeps her out of it for most of the game, but she's the laziest feeling one to me that doesn't come back as a member of your squad. But the fact is that once she finishes this, she says that she has to keep herself and her sister safe. Well, one new introduction to this game is that the galaxy map shows what systems are now occupied by Reapers, again adding to this oppressive atmosphere that is just great. And by this point in the game, everything is occupied by the Reapers. So yeah, Miranda really feels like a cheat just because they didn't want to pay the actress to voice the last 3 or 4 missions and put the time into being a playable character. Speaking of playable characters, a big thank you. My favorite character Tally only returned because from what I understand, 1 or 2 programmers said that you had to make her a character that could be on the squad. Originally, she wasn't going to be there. So, thank you. One thing this game does very well is it does build things up and resolve some of the plot lines. The plot lines of what happens to the Krogan is the most perfectly resolved plot line. Everything comes together to make it the most perfectly resolved plot line I have ever seen in a video game. Your decisions feel like they have weight. You are carrying these things out to their conclusion. And all your characters make a cameo. And as I said, apart from Miranda, they all have good. The ones that aren't there, they all have good reasons for not being there, and they're important reasons. So that helps. And the way that you find secrets in this, okay, it's good and bad. The good part is it makes you feel under attack more than ever. When you scan a system, that alerts Reapers, and they'll come after you. They will come after you. So that fills it with tension. And while it just resets to your last checkpoint save, fact is that the music that comes in with this is so intense you don't want to get caught. I mean, I know it doesn't have any lasting repercussion because I can just reload, but it's still, when you hear that Reaper thing, it just, and then this music come in, it just sets my nerves on edge every single time. It's not a jump scare. This is tension and fear. That's what true horror is, tension and fear in my book. And this is tension and fear. So you feel the weight of the Reapers. Everywhere you go, you see them crashing. Every time there are fights that you can't win. Every time you have to pull people out, or every time you have to run because of Reapers, you feel it. And all your characters are developed. And even a character I didn't much care for at first, Freddie Prinze Jr.'s James Vega, which if I was designing this game, I would have taken I still would take his character out and replace it with one of your longer term with one of the characters from Mass Effect 2. However, that being said, James Vega is well developed. He goes from just being a typical Marine meathead to having substance to him if you keep talking to him. And Freddie Prinze Jr. plays it well. All the voice acting is excellent. Even the much bashed Mark Meer has honed his sort of professional soldier Shepard who is putting his head down and just doing the job. Difference with to me, it's just a matter of personal taste. Yes, there are a few lines in Mass Effect 1 that Mark Meer delivers awfully, and you can tell that Jennifer Hale has much more experience than him. I mean, she goes all the way back at least to the Spider-Man animated series I watched as a kid. So, yeah, doing multiple characters on that show. So, yeah, she has a lot. So, she's older than Meer, and she had more experience. So, my infamous Meer line to me is when he says, "It was probably trying to block communications." And I feel like that was the last line that they were recording for the day, and they had kept him in the booth. And they had kept him in the booth from like 8 in the morning till like 2 at night or something. Jennifer Hale delivers that line much better, so I don't know, but it feels like somebody who's like on their last shot of the day, and the sound engineer or the voice director, nobody could care less. I've been in that position working. I mean, I've worked double shifts, cart pushing and unloading stuff, and also double shifts remodeling stuff at Walmart. And that's what his voice sounded like. It sounded like me. It sounded like me at the end of what I remember at the end of that double shift, when you're pretty much sleepwalking. That's what it sounded like to me. So I don't know if it was bad acting or bad scheduling, or maybe it was a combination of them both, but it comes off as the most lackluster line. This line in Mass Effect 1 where he talks about the Reaper sound and going, "It was probably trying to block communications." Comes off as the most lackluster line, and it makes it sound like Shepard is going to crumple to the floor, going to crumple to the ground at any second, and just, everyone's going to go, Shepard, and they're going to be poking him with their feet. His squad mates are just going to be poking him with their feet and going, "Shepard," and he's just going to be, and all you're going to hear from the ground is going. Oh, great. Am I getting distracted again? But yeah, it all comes together perfectly. His voice acting is right on point, and is up there with Hale's now. And when you see what the war is doing to your friends, when you see what the war is doing to, and there's a DLC character, when you see what it does, and something I expected not to care about again, BioWare blew me away by making me care about EDI and her new robot body. I mean, that sounds like such a trope, and that's such an overused trope, and some of the discussions are such typical data discussions. However, they all relate to the war, and they're all being brought up by the war, and her her really coming to grips with being completely self-aware. And there's even a surprise about her origin that I won't give away, but all I can say is play all the side quests. Play every single side quest, including one in the Soul system that seems pointless at the time, and then, well, wait for the next to wait for the third to last mission, and you will be completely blow, and this will come as a complete shock. Jack develops as a character in this to the point where I think both she, where I think all the romances are rewarding in their own way, although some are more rewarding than others, because like Miranda gets pushed to the side in this, which I think was a mistake. So does Ashley and Caden. They both get pushed to the side for the first half of the game, but thankfully they make up for it in the second half. And again, things feel natural on that front. BioWare has a gift for making these things feel natural, and BioWare fans like to joke that it's all about the sex scenes and everything, but that's just a joke. At least for 90% of the Mass Effect fans I've met online, it's just a joke. We got hit pretty hard and pretty early with this mass hysteria because Mass Effect dared to have these romantic subplots in it, the original one, and they dared to have one of what would be considered a PG sex scene, or if it was on a TV show or a movie in it, and everybody went out of their minds. So our way of sort of dealing with that, rather than just bashing the media, is to just joke around and act. But everybody knows that it's in good humor, and everybody knows that everyone has their favorites and least favorites and everything. And yeah, I'd say Tally's continues to be rewarding, as does Jax becomes really rewarding as you see that what she went through and opening her up in Mass Effect 2 really changed her as a person. The sort of ultra hard defense that she had to put up because it was the only way to survive how she grew up. Now, instead of going up around her, it's something that she projects around other people, and it really plays out like I'd play a game with her as the main character, because it feels like the second part of a superhero origin story. She has the dark past, and then she has the big event happen in her life that opens her up and shows her that this bad thing that happened to her, she can do something good with it. And then in the third game, boy, she's doing good things with it. Tally, because it ties into the end of a 3-century-long war, and if you play your cards right in this, you will feel like the biggest hero ever. I mean, this is the closest the game has ever made me feel to being the Doctor. In particular, I'd say in particular, it makes me feel like either the third, 7th, or 11th Doctor, because the way you can end this conflict between the Quarians and the Geth that has been 3 centuries just sounds like a speech any one of them would make, and you feel like you've earned it. I mean, you have to go through a boss battle that really kicked my butt the first couple of times I tried for 2 days when I first played through the game, and then when you get to it, it makes all the difference. Your choices don't really affect who lives and dies in this game the way that it did in but it does affect how strong your fleet is, and how strong your fleet is affects the outcome of the game and such, and you learn all sorts of things about the lore. And the combat has been immensely improved. The combat has been, once again, immensely improved. Things have, except for the fact that you will want to change your Omni Gel. For some reason, they redid the shortcut. The Omni Gel, which revives your companions, and you can heal yourself with, has always been mapped to button free on the PC version of Mass Effect. From Mass Effect to Mass Effect 2. Then, for some reason, they start out this game by mapping it to button 2. So, you'll be constantly hitting it when you need it, and not hitting button free when you need it out of pure instinct, because you're not looking at the keyboard, you're doing, by this point, you've put in probably close to 70 hours into the game period by the time you start into the series period, by the time you start this game. So it's muscle memory. A lot of the combat is muscle memory. So, if one piece of advice I can leave you with, the first chance you get, remap Omni Gel to button free, because you'll have a lot easier time. So as I said, the characters are still well developed. The trouble, but here's where the game runs into some problems and where it feels rushed. And I put this blame fully on EA. First of all, in the first two Mass Effect games, in the first Mass Effect game, I ran into two bugs that would crash the game and I would have to restart it and reload. Okay. Mass Effect 2, I've been playing all these years and I have yet to run into any game crashing bugs. It is that polished of a game. And that includes multiple playthroughs of Mass Effect 2 on the PC and on the Xbox 360. I can't speak for the PlayStation 3. I do not own a PlayStation 3. If I did, you bet I would also own the Mass Effect trilogy on PlayStation 3. However, there are bugs all over the place, and I've encountered them on both the Xbox 360 version and the PlayStation and the PC version. What's more, some of these bugs haven't been patched. Still, 5 years since this game came out, and some bugs were not patched. You just have to find workarounds yourself. Thankfully, there are workarounds. The worst of them were patched, and there are workarounds. But, like, the game shipped with a bug where one side quest a button would just not pop up that you needed to hit, and well, that's a reason why you keep multiple save files. Also, side quests have been gutted. There's no more talking to people and finding out the history of things. You don't even talk to people to get side quests. And you can't even learn more about the universe through the side quest. Side quests don't exist. Everything in this game is part of a main quest. Instead, and you have one hub world. This is an RPG with one hub world, and it's not a very big one. You have the Citadel, and that's it. Everything else is just a combat corridor that you run down, and whereas Mass Effect 2 did a good job of making its corridors feel more diverse by having the paths branch out at points, this, even when you're in an open area, you're still usually stuck on a bridge or stuck just going one way. It's sort of like Final Fantasy 13 in that there's only one way to go. Forward, 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 forward. Turn. If there is a turn, you'll just find a blank wall and just turn, and there really aren't any sub areas to explore or anything. So while it goes back to feeling more like an RPG because you have more powers and you can go up to 60, that is a good thing. They re-raised the level to 60, and for the first time, it imports your level from the previous game. So it imports your level and your points from the previous game. So you start off this already feeling like a combat veteran, which is the one complaint, which is one of the few complaints I had about Mass Effect 2, is that you restart. So because they topped it off at level 30, you restarted at level 0 with your imported save with no points to spend. This starts you off. You have points to spend. You reach level for if you played Mass Effect 2 to the end, you reached level 30. So you start out at level 31. There are more points, more choices of different powers. Not as many as in not the overwhelming amount you had in Mass Effect 2, in Mass Effect 1, but you do have choices of powers. You can upgrade your squad mates' powers. You can armor for your squad mates is still cosmetic only. So you're just changing their look, but armor for you has a lot of options, and weapon upgrades are back. Ammo upgrades are still a biotic power like in Mass Effect 2. However, the weapon upgrades are back, and it's a huge help. And here's the best part. The upgrades that you get for things, now, instead of having to go through and delete all the previous versions, if you get it, if you have a certain upgrade and you come across, like each upgrade has like 5 to 8 different, levels to it. And the different guns, you can buy different guns of them. And you now have a weight limit that affects how fast you run and how fast your shields and biotic powers recharge. So you want to carefully manage your weapon inventory and carefully pick what you choose, which adds another layer of strategy, which I approve of. And now, once you find the upgraded version of an upgrade that you already have, or a gun you already have, the previous version just disappears. You're just automatically holding that, and it's automatically upgraded with the latest version you've unlocked, of the upgrades you've unlocked. So inventory management, this has the best inventory management of any RPG I've ever played. So that is great. However, the side quests are just you listening in to people on the Citadel. You just go to a planet, fire a probe, it tells you you've collected the doodad, you run away from the Reapers, go back, talk to that person, they just say thank you. You don't get to ask them about the object, you don't get to ask them about yourselves. They're not really characters. They're just fetch quest dispensers. And what passes is fetch quest. And again, I blame this on the short dev time EA gave them. EA wrecking everything they touch since the 1980s. I don't want to get flagged by YouTube, but if I say what I think EA should actually stand for, if they were being honest in advertising, let's just say I think it should, for truth in advertising purposes, I think they should be forced to, by law, to change their name to something that rhymes with electronic cat poles. But anyway, their short dev time shows everywhere with those subquests, with you getting stuck on ladders. You try to go down a ladder, and the only way to go down a ladder is to slide down it like this. They added this new mechanic of going down these ladders in these multi-level levels, and it's cool in theory, but you'll get in these places, and unless you get the camera in exactly the right spot with your mouse or your thumbstick, Shepard will go for the animation, but he'll stay at the top and just look like an idiot going shh, as the sound effect plays like this. Shh, Again, this has never been patched. Sometimes you just have to stand there for up to 2 hours trying and trying again because there is no universal place where you point the camera and it just works. In fact, there's one piece of DLC that I am advising you not to get because there is a ladder on it that is always glitched in every version, never patched. In fact, none of these ladders were patched. But this one is the one that everyone, no matter what system they play on, it's glitched. And what's more, the reward in this piece of DLC is not substantial. This piece of DLC is the Leviathan DLC, and besides getting one scientist added to your forces, you do not get anything, meaningful rewards, even though you go through all these puzzles, all this crime solving, and you get a cool trinket for your cabin, and a lot of cool stuff happens in this, and some lore gets explained, but it's not worth it. It's not worth spending 2 hours trying to get down a ladder because EA didn't give BioWare time to figure out how to do ladders. Either that or the Unreal Free engine just can't support going down ladders. In which case, why did they put ladders there? But once we complained about it till we were blue in the face on their tech support board. I got banned because they said I was being rude for not dropping it when I kept asking them when they were going to patch this ladder on this $15 piece of DLC that adds 90 minutes of playtime. $15. I paid $90 for the full game, so $15 is like 60. Yeah, that is 1/6 of what I paid for the full game. And all I wanted to know was, could they patch this? That is what happens when you let EA buy your freaking company. Never let that happen to you. Do not go publicly traded because they can go a hostile buyout. If you want to be a game developer and you want to do good games, for the love of everything you hold dear, do not go public with it. Stick to doing low budget games and stay privately owned, because the moment you go public, either EA or Ubisoft is going to buy you and ruin you. That is how the modern video game world works. They just buy it up and then they just push out as many titles as possible as quickly as possible and then let the company burn. So yeah, subquests are meaningless. Subquests are meaningless, ladders are glitched. So those are big problems here. You don't get development outside of your main squad. Some of your returning characters get sidelined. And it's so painful. And the final conclusion doesn't feel rewarding at all. Everything you build up to just doesn't feel rewarding. It takes what would have been a 9 or a 10 game, and it just crushes. And it just takes those good moments and spreads them out and crushes them. And it does lazy things like, no matter what enemy you're fighting, they all behave in pretty much the same manner now. And you spend most of your time fighting Cerberus. I'd say about 80% of the game, you're fighting Cerberus troops. This is supposed to be the story of you finally facing the full force of the Reapers, and you're out putting out brush fires with Cerberus. That's not to say that when you get to the end of some of these things you don't feel rewarded, but when the mind control Geth troops, the people who have been transformed, the horrors that have been transformed by the Reapers into their own troops, and the Cerberus troops all use the exact same tactics. You feel like you're fighting the same thing over and over again, and when most of the time it is the same thing, and it's just a minor distraction. And they're led by a guy who they were obviously thinking of action figure sales and maybe doing an anime, but they were thinking like this is 1980s and ninja, 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 ninja. It feels this character, Kai Lang, you have multiple chances to kill him. If you were interacting with these, but they always put him in cutscenes. You want to know why? Because if you were interacting, if you had any interaction, if you had any Renegade or Paragon interrupts, he would be dead the first time you saw him. He attacks people, he attacks a whole squad with who with their guns took down Proto Reapers. He attacks somebody with a sword, and you just let him run across the room at you with his sword, and suddenly gunships that you were taking down with a few shots are suddenly invincible. Why? Oh, because they took away heavy weapons in this game, despite the fact that you would think heavy weapons would be the one thing Shepard would be requiring on this mission. Because he's taking on the full brunt. He's supposed to be taking on the full brunt and leading the forces of the galaxy to victory. He has to forge alliances, and that's one thing that works. You can't get everybody on your side, so that works. But you would think he would have every weapon in the universe at his disposal. And then when you get to the final battle of Earth, there are no tactics. It's just a cutscene playing out. Regardless of what you did, it's still the same cutscene. And all the ships just fly willy-nilly, not using any tactics. Even though, if you read the codex and what you've seen prior in the game proves that you could stand a chance of at least holding off the Reapers if you used certain tactics, like having capital ships with certain weapons and having them coordinate their fire on a single Reaper at once, take that Reaper down. You do have weapons that with a few shots can take a Reaper down. And these weapons are not rare. So some of these weapons can be carried by a person. So you have to ask yourself, why aren't these ships all equipping, and why aren't they coordinating their fire instead of flying all willy-nilly and getting themselves killed off easily? Why aren't 3 or 4 of these ships all saying, "Oh, look, see that Reaper, 1 o'clock, all ships target that Reaper"? You actually do that earlier in the game. You have a bunch of ships target a single Reaper that you paint as a target with a gun that you can carry on your back. So why don't you do it to them? So why don't you use this? Why isn't anybody using their brains? It's because the game was rushed and they couldn't figure out a way to make the Reapers an all-consuming threat. There's a giant plot hole. Suddenly the Citadel can move, and it can move instantaneously. Never explained. It just moves halfway across the galaxy instantaneously. It's as the game goes on, the early parts of the game are really polished, but as it goes on and on, it degrades. And so you may have a hard time. The characters are what will get you to the end of it. And yeah, it's not the worst game I ever played. I'm not claiming that. But there are so many things that just could have been better. It just needed one more year. I think Electronic Arts panicked, because hit the panic button because they found out Nintendo would be launching the Wii U in 2006 in 2012, and they didn't want to get left out in cold like they did with the Wii's launch. And they thought the next generation was going to begin the moment the Wii U launched, and that their game would look like garbage or be completely overshadowed. But as it turned out, of course, that didn't turn out to be the case. The Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 got good support for at least another 2 years, as did the generation of computer hardware that game was made for. So they panicked, so they rushed it out the door for nothing. And all they did was gut it. And then they did the same thing again. I'm not going to go on about Andromeda because I haven't gotten a chance to play that full game. But is this rant long enough? I said this was supposed to be a celebration. But the more I think about what EA did to BioWare by rushing this game, and how they rushed what was brilliant, and how even the rush parts, you can see the brilliance in them, but then it falls short. You're just like, ah! That being said, it doesn't, the brilliant parts are still there. So, the base game with the ending patch, I'm giving a 5 out of 10. Alright, now let's go on to the DLC. There are two pieces of Mustone DLC. There is From Ashes, which gives you a new character, which was always supposed to be part of the main game story, which shows more of EA's greed. You want to know how this new character that you get in the From Ashes DLC, he's more fleshed out than Kasumi or Zaid were. You get a ton of conversations with him, so that's good, but that only proves that he was part of the main game. In fact, he was so part of the main game that on the Xbox 360, he was actually on the disc. Yeah, when you pay for the DLC to unlock him, unfortunately I didn't have to pay extra. Oh, at least because I bought the collector's edition, because I wanted the collector's book and the badge and everything. But when you and yeah, I know, for something I treasured, this is really beat up. You want to know why? A computer collapsed on top of it. I paid $90, and I was intending to keep this in perfect shape because look at this box, it's just great. Then a computer fell on top of, then I was woken up by a loud crash as a computer I had in storage fell off of a shelf and on top of it. But anyway, the great moments, the moments in it are either great or awful and glitch filled, and together they average out to an average game. But anyway, so you need From Ashes, definitely From Ashes. Then Citadel DLC, which is, in my opinion, the best piece of DLC I have ever gotten from a game. It adds hours of playtime, tons of fun side quests. Everything I complained about, all the characters that were sidelined, they get multiple moments. You get funny moments, you get dramatic moments, you get new objectives in a combat simulator where you eventually have to do a holodeck run amok sequence and survive that. You get great moments. You get to see a Blasto movie getting made. You get a huge party. You get a whole new campaign in it where I'm not going to give away spoilers, but it's a very personal campaign. And for one time in the game, you get to take every single one of your living squad mates with you on a mission, and you're all shooting things together. So it is awesome. If I was giving this a, this is a must-buy. Do not buy this game and not buy the Citadel and From Ashes DLC. They are the two best pieces of DLC in the Mass Effect series and elevate the whole game. In the maybe category, there's Take Back Omega, which is okay. Which is okay. It gives you some more insight into Arya, and you get to spend more time on Omega, which I am thrilled with. However, it doesn't have any long-term consequences for the game, so yeah, so despite the fact that I feel I have to play it every time I play through the game, when it comes to telling you to spend your money on something extra for this game, I'm saying that it's a maybe, and yeah, and it will depend on how much you enjoyed Arya's character in Mass Effect 2, and how much you want to see more of her grimy, morally questionable world, and how much you want to be able to affect a moral choice she makes at the end of this piece of DLC. It adds about an hour, maybe an hour and a half of gameplay to the game. So, yeah. So that's a maybe. Miss, I already said, Leviathan, if only because of that stupid ladder glitch and the fact that it doesn't add a single war asset besides one scientist. Oh, you get this big thing that says it's going to fight on the side of war for you, but does it show up when it counts up your war assets? Nope. Is it ever mentioned again in the game? What do you think this is? A game series known for keeping track of all your choices and having even the minute ones as to even choices such as how you treated a fan asking for an autograph and pictures and who got a little stalkery, counting even that towards something that helps in your end game? What do you think this is? This isn't that. This is just a platform for selling to EA. This was nothing more. The single player was just an annoyance getting in the way of selling the multiplayer game. That's what it feels like. So, yeah, that's a maybe. So yeah, the Leviathan DLC is a miss. I mean, I forgot which piece I was talking about. Okay. So, I gave it a 5 out of 10. That's it for the base game. Right? Well, no. There is something that elevates it and makes this a much less frustrating game to play. 3 pieces of DLC that fix things. First, there is the Mass Effect Happy Ending mod. You can find this on either BioWare's message board or on Nexus mod. This mod makes things feel worthwhile and gets rid of the problem of the best ending in most people's opinions still involving you stabbing friends who you had just helped free from slavery in the back and killing them, or doing the equivalent of assimilating everything in the galaxy, like you're a flippin' Borg queen all of a sudden, or just enslaving a whole race. Yeah, here's the thing about the ending that was offensive to me is the end of Mass Effect 2, with the introduction of the character of Legion, caused you to completely look at the entire conflict at the heart of Mass Effect in a different way, and it staged it, and it framed it, and made it an allegory for racial conflict and tensions. Well, then at the end they tell you an all-knowing being tells you that the only way to solve racial conflicts is for either all races to become the same so there aren't any differences, one race to completely wipe out the other, or another race to enslave the other so there can be no conflict. That's it. There's no middle ground, no way to understanding, no way for people to walk away from being on the edge of extreme and I'm gonna kill you because you're different, or something, or I know you're so stupid you're gonna destroy yourself, so I'll protect you from your own stupidity because I can't trust you with the freedom to make your own choices. Anyone else, when this is framed in that way, if they had just kept the Geth as mindless machines and not given a personal face to them with Legion, this could have worked. But once they gave him a personal face with Legion, in my opinion, that that changed everything. And the fact that they classify the Reapers as basically they classify both the Geth and the Reapers as basically belonging to the same racial group, Synthetics, that makes the ending one of the most offensive things I have ever sat through. It's like Birth of a Nation 2012. So, so the happy ending mod, while it doesn't give you a new ending, and no, I wasn't expecting Shepard to live. That wasn't what I was mad about with the ending. Just let me stop that there. Everyone always tells me, oh, that's why you were mad. No, I went into the game with a sense of apprehension, feeling that the only way Shepard was going to be able to save the galaxy was for Shepard to lay down his or her life to save everyone. I figured that was on the table for whatever ending choices there were. That was always going to be there. So it wasn't that upset me. However, it's a nice bonus that this mod causes Shepard to live. However, it also has the side effect of making it so you stand on your principle and you don't have to spend like 10 or 15 minutes chatting with this stupid star child that comes out of nowhere, that just comes out of Shepard's dreams and is just like, there are plenty of videos dissecting what's wrong with the ending. I'm just going to say that that mod alone elevates the game. And what's more, I don't care that there are a few lip sync issues. You want to know why? Because throughout the game and its DLC, again, the game was so rushed, there are moments where characters will talk and their lips will not even move, or their textures will not fully load. And this is on the console versions too. And they're just standing there and they're just like, I wanted to come. I want to come. And their mouth doesn't even move. And maybe their arm moves a little like this. So having the character's mouth move, or having the camera pan away from the character as they use either voice clips that were found in the game's code that weren't used in the final game, or voice clips from previous games to give the character speech, and most of the time the lips do sync up. There are only like 2 instances I can think of where the lips don't sync up exactly. And just having that in there, and having new voice acting and new cutscenes that they put together in there, just that elevates it. And I couldn't care about the lip sync, because if what I paid for couldn't care about lip syncing, and I'm supposed to overlook it, then I'm sorry. Something that I got for free that was originally worked on by, I think, Free People. Their team later expanded. You'll see longer credits at the end of it now as new versions came out. But I think it was originally worked on by Free People. I'm not going to complain that it has a glitch, that it has a little glitch in it that's in the full game that was worked on by dozens of people, and that probably had tens of millions of dollars spent on it. So yeah, that is a great mod in my opinion. Another great mod that adds tons of gameplay and makes a lot of your choices from previous games matter. Now please understand, there is limited voice acting in this mod. Most of it will be delivered through text, but it makes those scanning missions that I was complaining about, it gives them a point, because a lot of times they'll tie in to the outcome of a battle or something, or they'll have you, at least in text, meeting someone, or they'll have you at least having your previous decision, having you to make a moral choice, and the best choice for the war isn't always the nice choice. and they'll have you making choices that can get colonies wiped out. And yeah, it all happens in text. It all happens in the same scanning mini game, but this time instead of it's put into a context. So, and it probably adds another 3 or 4 hours to the game. And it's constantly being updated. The expanded galaxy map mod is a must-own mod. And again, you can just install this easily. All of these install just like Mass Effect 2 DLC. You just download them from Nexus Mods, you click install, they install. No problems. The last one is one that corrects my complaint about Miranda. It's called the Miranda mod. It's rather new. You can see it on a video that I have on the very playlist that this is here at the end of the... Just skip to near the end of the Miranda romance, and you'll see that, yeah, it not only does it make her a squad member in 2 of the last missions that you play, but it gives you 3 new conversations with her, 2 of which are interactive. That's incredible. Yes, it's all old voice clips, because of course they couldn't pay whatever. I forget her name. Sarah from Chuck. Yeah, she plays Miranda. And I'm so ashamed I'm blanking on her name right now. But this has been a long review. This has been a long day. This has been a long review, and I've been playing Mass Effect pretty much constantly for like the past 2.5 months, getting videos ready for today. So anyway, but they all fit together and they all work and they add some depth and it feels less idiotic, and it even adds missions that you can fund through her. She's using her father's resources to set up missions to set up guerrilla hit and run missions, and guess what? Some of them don't always turn out perfectly. Some of them, if you choose to support the wrong mission at the wrong time, it can turn out disastrously and you'll get a report about everyone you set in dying because the Reaper forces were too strong, or you made a mistake or something, or you didn't read the intel right. So that's an incredible mod. So the Miranda mod, that's good. So there are free must-own. So with the Happy Ending mod, expanded galaxy map mod, and Miranda mod installed along with the Citadel DLC and From Ashes, it elevates this from a 5 out of 10 to an 8.5 out of 10. I would tie it with those. I would tie it, despite its glitches, despite its problems, I would tie it with the first Mass Effect in a score. The first Mass Effect is still my favorite game in the series, but this becomes a worthy ending to the series, and all those things I complained about become things that I can deal with. Instead of sometimes stopping at Mass Effect 2, I now always play through Mass Effect 3 with those 2 pieces of DLC installed, and those 3 mods installed. So get the mods because it's more than worth it. And that concludes my overview of my favorite game series of all time. I know this last one was a bit of a rant, but the rest of this today is a celebration. I just want to get my thoughts out there, and this is just how I feel about the games. Feel free to discuss it, to disagree with me, whatever. The great thing about Mass Effect is that it's so open, it allows people to have different opinions and different viewpoints and bring them into this. In that way, it reminds me of the best episodes of, say, Babylon 5 or Star Trek The Next Generation, in that it allows us, in that it has characters deep enough, it has a character that we can, it has at least one character that we can all latch onto, and that we'll all love, and it just opens up the door for debates. This is an amazing series, despite the flaws in the third game brought on by EA rushing it. This trilogy is the best game trilogy, I feel, in history. And it is my favorite thing to sit down, and it is my favorite trilogy to sit down and play. Star Fox 64 is still my favorite game of all time, but this is my favorite series. Mass Effect is just an amazing effort by everyone involved. And even when they fall down, you can see what they were going for. And I would just like to thank BioWare for putting all that, the original Mass Effect team at BioWare for putting all that hard work and putting up with all the garbage I'm sure EA poured on them. You guys did good. I mean, 10 years later, I am still playing through this trilogy. There aren't a lot of games that of this type and of that generation that I can say this about. But of the 7th generation, I can say that about the Mass Effect series. And I'm always finding some little corner or line of dialogue I haven't noticed before. So, you haven't tried these games? Give them a try. If you've played them in the past but let it lapse, play it again. Mass Effect is an incredible series, and it's worth celebrating its 10th anniversary today. So, either play it, have fun, watch some of my videos if you want, and just enjoy.